Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to talk about what GVM is, why you need to upgrade it, and what are the options. So GVM is the gross vehicle mass, and that is the maximum that your vehicle can weigh, and that's important because it determines payload, and payload is the amount and weight of things you can fit to your vehicle so that you can go touring or towing or whatever else you want to do with it. So as an example, your typical four-wheel drive is fitted out with a whole bunch of accessories. You might have a bull bar, snorkel, radio, dual battery, cargo system. It all adds up, right? And I did a rough calculation there very quickly, came out to 266 kilograms, and that's probably on the light side. But that's only the things which you've actually bolted into your vehicle or replaced. And even if you replace things, for example, that you replace tyres, you might think there's no extra weight. Well, it is, because even if you don't go up in diameter or width, then those light truck off-road construction tyres will actually weigh more than the originals. So it all adds up. And if you replace the suspension, typically the aftermarket suspension weighs a little bit more than the original equipment as well. So that's the vehicle modified, but you haven't even got in it yet. Now, if we actually get in it and we put people in it and food and cooking gear and sleeping gear and a tent and all the rest of that, then quick tot up there, easily over 600 kilograms, and then that gives us over 900 kilograms worth of modifications and load. And that's not even for a long trip. I mean, those cars on the right there, crossing the Simpson, for example, and you'd be wanting to take at least 100 litres of water for two people, maybe more, depending on how long you're going to go. And you know, it really just all starts to add up very, very quickly indeed. And I've not even allowed for things like spare wheel carriers, underbody protection, even taller, wider tyres, awnings, a ute service body, and all the other things that we love to put on the vehicles. So here's the problem. We are taking a lot of kit when we tow or when we go off-road touring, and that kit weighs a lot more than the vehicle is able to legally carry, and that's why people are looking at GVM upgrades. So let's take a look at a typical payload, and the payload is how much a vehicle can carry, and that's the difference between its gross vehicle mass and its unladen weight. So we'll take the Land Cruiser 200 series as an example. We're going to start with the Poverty Pack. So both these cars popular for towing and for off-road touring. So we've got, in this diagram's to scale by the way, a GVM of 3350 kilograms and unladen weight of 2640 kilograms. Now, I have explained the different types of weight like tear and GVM and payload and GCM in a different video, which I'll put a link to now, so you can go through that if you haven't read that already. I'm just going to assume that you're familiar with these terms now. Anyway, that gives us a payload of 710 kilograms, and that's fine, but unfortunately, of course, we've got 907 kilograms of stuff to take, so that's about 200 kilograms over. So we've got to delete 200 kilograms worth of stuff, maybe leave the kids at home and something like that, then you'll be able to fit it in. Now, if we take the Sahara, same deal. So that's 3350 GVM, but that weighs more, 2740 kilograms, and the reason for that, it's got electric luxuries all over the place, and that's an extra 100 kilograms of weight, gives us only 610 kilograms of payload. And again, so we're about 300 kilograms over, so you're going to take even more stuff out of the Sahara. So that's one reason to buy a GX over a Sahara. So you're thinking, what about a ute? Surely a ute would be better, and you would be right. So let's take the popular Ranger XLT, GVM of 3200, unladen weight 2178, payload 1022, and yes, it does indeed squeeze in there, but again, that's maybe on the light side. If we take a look at the Triton GSR, we have their GVM of 2900, unladen weight 2045, payload 855. Oops, we are over on the Triton as well. So you can see that it's really easy to go over your payload and exceed your GVM, and that is why there's so much attention on GVM upgrades. Now, these figures were sent in to me by a reader, and they come from a four-wheel drive shop. There's a bunch of vehicles that went through. He's listed the unladen weight, the GVM, and I've averaged it out at the bottom there. And you can see that on average, the modifications came out to 386 kilograms. Now, not all vehicles had exactly the same modification. Not all of them have got awnings, for example, or roof racks, and different types of bull bar, etc. But you can see that the average is still pretty high, 386 kilograms there, and that uses, on average, 43% of the payload. Now, I would suggest that any four-wheel drive shop could give you pretty similar figures. It is a substantial amount of payload in vehicle modifications before you even get into it. This chart is the same thing, except the same data. I've just put it into a chart format just to give an idea there, and you can see that yeah, even the lightest one is getting up there, sort of 180, 150 kilograms, and the heaviest one is coming up to 1,000. So a lot of work has been done on that particular Ford Ranger ute. Okay, so what is a GVM upgrade? It is an engineering package designed to increase a vehicle's GVM such that it can pass all the relevant regulatory tests and then be officially recognised at the revised GVM. There's two important points with that. The first one is it's officially recognised. You can't just take a good suspension kit, put it in there and go, yeah mate, she'll be right. Even if the vehicle is capable of now handling a greater load, it makes no difference whatsoever unless you have the placard. So you've got to get the placard. And secondly, it's an engineering package. Now, a lot of GVM upgrades, and example one here from Ironman for the LC200, are just shocks and springs, but that doesn't mean to say that I haven't considered other upgrades as well, or that you should too. So it's whatever is needed for it to pass the official test. So that's what a GVM upgrade is, the whole engineering package to get to that new GVM. And you can see there's an example of the tests. So on the left hand side there, that's the Ironman LC200. And that vehicle has fitted out for electronic stability control testing, so it's got to drive in certain conditions at a very specific speed through a series of cones as a swerve test, and it's all very carefully instrumented, and often it's driven by a robot driver. So you've got to do all of that in order to get the certification with your revised suspension kit or whatever else you've put on there. And there's a bunch of other tests to do, such as braking and engineering. So it is not a trivial process to do a GVM upgrade at all. Okay, now we need to take a look at axle loads because they're really important for understanding GVM upgrades. So we'll take the LC200 again, we'll keep with that, and we'll look at the OEM specs. So the maximum weight on the front axle you can put is 1630 kilograms. The maximum weight you can put on the rear axle is 1950 kilograms. Now that gives us 1630 plus 1950 is 3580, and a GVM is only 3350. So that's a difference of 280 kilograms, which means that we've got load flexibility front and rear, and that is a good thing. So we could, for example, put 1630 kilograms on the max and we could reduce the rear to 1720, or we could put only 1400 on the front and go to the max on 1950 on the rear. So we've got a decent bit of load flexibility there. Diagrammatically, this is what it looks like. GVM 3350, front 1630, rear 1950. Now you can't have both at the same time because that exceeds your GVM. What you can do is you can say, well, I'm just going to go for maximum on the front and then I'll lose a bit on the rear, or I'm going to go to maximum on the rear, lose a bit on the front. So you've got that flexibility there, which is exactly what you want. Now here's the Ranger XLT, same sort of deal. So 3330 kilograms total there, that's your 1480 plus 1850, GVM's 3200. You've only got 130 kilograms worth of difference between the two, so you don't have quite as much flexibility as the 200 series. Now the Raptor, close relationship to the Ranger, is worse. It's actually got an uprated front axle compared to the Ranger, but the rear axle is considerably downrated, and the total comes to 1390 kilograms, which is also the GVM, so you've got no front rear load flexibility at GVM whatsoever. Alright, so let's get into types of GVM upgrade. Now there's two basic types. There's the axle sum and there's the axle upgrade. The axle sum is simply taking the existing axle loads, adding them together and saying that's what the new GVM is. The axle upgrade, or rather axle re-rate as opposed to upgrade, is actually re-rating the axles so that they are rated to carry more than the sum of the OEM axle load, and that requires a lot more testing and engineering. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's the 200 again, 2740 kilograms unladen, we'll go for the Sahara, GVM of 3350, payload of 610. And then we've got front axle load, rear axle load exactly as we had before, 1480, 1850. Now if we go for an axle sum, again 2740 unladen, GVM is now increased to 3580, but the axle loads are the same. So yes, you've got a greater GVM, but you lose that front rear load flexibility if you only take an axle sum, and you only increase your GVM by a bit over 200 kilograms. So it's not a bad option, but it's not ideal. You need to be aware of the limitations when you're doing that. With the 200 series, it's not too bad because you've got an extra, over 200 kilograms worth of payload there, and when you're coming off a base of 600, that's a lot. With things like the Ranger, you've got 1,000 kilograms to start with, you're only adding 130. Value equation isn't quite there. Now if we go for axle upgrade where we re-rate the axles, again 2740 kilograms unladen, but this time the GVM goes up to 4,000 kilograms and the payload goes to 1260. And how is that possible? Well, the front axle's re-rated to 1800 kilos and the rear is re-rated to 2250. Now that means that you've got a total of 4,050 kilograms, so you've got a GVM of 4,000 kilograms with 50 kilograms of weight flexibility front and rear. So you can see that's absolutely preferable in terms of load carrying. Okay, so let's go through the pros and cons of GVM upgrades then. So for each type, you've got a pre-registration and a post-registration, which is exactly what it sounds. So with your pre-registration, you can get it done, or you have to get it done before the vehicle is first registered on any Australian road. With post-registration, you can get it done at any time. Sounds good? Well, there's pros and cons. So all of them give you an increase in capacity. The axle sum, as discussed, can only go to the limit of what the OEM axles are rated to, and so you do get an increase in capacity, but not very much. Your axle re-rating, then you can get a much higher limit, as you can see on the diagram there on the right, and that goes for pre or post registration. With both types, you can drive anywhere in Australia, so you can upgrade your GVM in Victoria and you can drive to Queensland or the Northern Territory or vice versa or whatever else. There's no restriction on that at all. But re-registration is different. Now, re-registration is when, if you move, let's say from Victoria to Queensland, and then you re-register your vehicle there, or you sell it to someone in a different state. Now, if you're pre-registration, then you don't need to worry about it, because that's just federal compliance, and that's done and dusted forevermore. That's the end of it. With your post-registration, that's signed off by an engineer in each state. So the guy who signed it off in Victoria won't be able to sign it off for use in Queensland, so you do need to re-register it. And of course, insert my standard rant here about how utterly stupid it is that we have different rules and regulations per state, forcing us to just jump through pointless regulatory hoops. But that is the way that it is. Now, can it be done on registered vehicles? Pre-registration, no. You can only do it before registration. Post-registration, yes, at any time. Is there an engineering cost specific to your vehicle, or no engineering cost specific to your vehicle? With pre-registration, there is no engineering cost, because it's done once and then that is it. Because you say, okay, we're going to do a pre-rego on all these LC200 Saharas, and that's it, ticked off. With your post-registration, that does require a per-vehicle sign-off, so there is a cost associated for each individual upgrade for that. Now, what's it best for? So if you axle someone, if there's, your best option, I think, is to do an axle upgrade for a new vehicle pre-registration, because if you're going to go for GVM upgrade, you want to go for one which is, you've done it once, you don't need to worry about re-engineering it if you move to different states, and you want the maximum increase. So if you can, go for the pre-registration axle upgrade, and then the next best one would be a post-registration axle upgrade if the vehicle's already registered, and you'd only do an axle sum if there's no other options there for you. So that's an overview of the different types of GVM upgrade. Now I've got to talk a bit about towing. So brief recap. GCM is the gross combination mass, that's the maximum the tow car and trailer can weigh. Now a GVM upgrade probably won't upgrade your GCM. and I think that's probably a good idea, because most vehicles have towing up rated limits greater than what they should have anyway, so increasing even further, not the best idea in my view. And that's becoming harder and harder as the government, I think, is starting to realise this and cracking down on GCM upgrades. At the moment, as of early April 2020, the situation is a bit fluid, and it's probably not going to get any easier. Okay, so a GVM upgrade will not change the maximum you can tow, but it will change how much you can tow at your new GVM, and I'll represent that graphically. However, an increase in rear axle load capacity is good for towing, even if you don't use the whole GVM, and this is why. So when you put your tow ball mass on, you can see that I've put a 250 kilogram tow ball mass on. That actually, due to the powers of leverage, increases the rear axle load by 344 kilograms, and it takes 94 kilograms off the front axle. So increasing your rear axle load, if you can, or is a good thing, because then that legally allows you to tow heavier trailers with heavier tow ball mass and not exceed the rear axle limit. So GVM upgrades are beneficial for towing, even if you don't upgrade your GCM. Alright, so let's take a look at our old friend the 200 Sahara again. So OEM 2740 unladen, GVM takes up to 3350, and a maximum tow is 35 kilograms, and we can actually tow that because the GCM, the gross combination mass, is 6850, which, and Toyota are pretty good about this. So for the 200 series, unlike many vehicles, the GCM is actually the same as the sum of the maximum tow of 3500 and the GVM of 3350, which is great. That means you can tow at GVM the maximum weight of 3500. Now if we go for an axle sum, the GCM doesn't change, at least not in this example, 6850 again, neither does the unladen weight of the vehicle, but the GVM we put up to 3580. But now if we go for put our 3500 kilograms on top of that, and we're above it by 270 kilograms, so we've got a 230, so we've got to knock that down. So the maximum we can tow now is actually 3270, not 3500. And if we go for an axle upgrade, again GCM doesn't change, 6850, not for this example, 2740 kilograms unladen, GVM's up to 4000, but if we try and add our 3500 onto that, way above, we can only tow 2850, which may or may not be a problem. So just be aware that unless you get the GCM upgraded, which you probably won't be able to do, then you won't be able to tow as heavy a trailer as you could if you use that full GVM. Now, of course, if you've got a vehicle with a GVM of 4,000 kilograms, you can of course tow 3.5 tons, but you can't then use all of that extra payload. So there's your trade-off. It does, however, give you more flexibility between payload in the car and towing than if you didn't have the GVM upgrade. So it's still beneficial even if you don't get a GCM upgrade. So here's an example using Ironman kit from the Land Cruiser 200 series. There you can see that they've got approximates there for the front axle load, 1630, 1950, that's the OEM, I've put that in there. Aftermarket they go to 1630, 1950, and just giving it an idea there of what a typical aftermarket cost would be to do a GVM upgrade. Now, one important note is that a GVM upgrade may change your vehicle category. So all vehicles in Australia are put into one or more, one category. Mostly for four-wheel drives, it's MC. And you may remember that I had a lot of interesting time a couple of years back trying to get Ford to shift the Everest from MA to MC into off-road passenger vehicle. Eventually they did, and so did Jeep, and Haval also followed as well. So it's one of my journalism career highlights, that one. So most vehicles in MC there as well. However, it might shift your vehicle into something like, let's say, a medium goods vehicle, NB or N2, or a light goods vehicle, which is what utes generally are. And if that is the case, then there may be different rules and compliances and other things you've got to fix up as well. So you'll be generally that's not the case, but be aware that there are some examples where that may happen. Okay, now what about not upgrading to GVM? Well, you could tow. So you could simply put some of the weight in a trailer and tow that, a very popular option, pros and cons. I'll run through some of these pros and cons in another video. I'll just recap them briefly for the moment. Or you could tow heavy. If you're going to tow something heavy, strongly advise you to get something like this, which is an F250. That's next to the 200 series. You can just see how much bigger and longer and heavier it is, and let me tell you, it tows way better than the 200 series. Just like it's like night and day. It's not just the power, it's the stability and the control and everything else. But those big American utes have, aside from being pretty costly, they are luxurious, by the way, and large. Two disadvantages: they're pretty big, obviously, hard to manoeuvre that into a shopping centre car park, but also their payload is miserable. You can't really put very much in them at all. They can tow a lot, but for some reason the payload is extremely ordinary. Another option, a light truck. There's a Mitsubishi Canto on 37-inch tyres. You can get them for around about $100,000. You can convert it to a motorhome, and that will set you back a couple of $100,000. Now, the light trucks go up to about 6,000 kilograms GVM, and they only weigh about 3 tons, 3.5. So that gives you a payload of between 2.5 and 3 tons. So that's a lot of payload there, and that should be plenty for pretty much everybody. So there's an option, but they are relatively expensive. They are there's no safety rating. The Canter at least is manual only. They're pretty slow. There's no luxuries. You've got to climb up. There's pros and cons for everything, right? But it's definitely an option to look at. Or you could go for a 6x6 conversion. So again, that might cost you $30,000-$40,000, but you can see there that's got about 1,600 kilos of weight on the back as I drive it, and that handled beautifully. So that gives you a lot of space, a lot of carrying capacity, and all of the luxury features of whatever vehicle is the base. So there's an option as well. There's others, but those are some to think about. Or you could just travel lighter, take less stuff, and instead of buying your stuff from the average high street camping place, go to a specialist hiking camp shop, and that's where you'll find the smallest, lightest and cheapest camping equipment. Alright, so the summary then. A lot of touring and towing four-wheel drive owners do struggle with vehicle weight, and the reason for that is that just a lot of stuff to take, and it's getting increasingly heavy, and payloads are, if anything, getting smaller. The GVM, gross vehicle mass, is the maximum a vehicle can legally weigh. There are insurance and legality issues for driving around exceeding that. And GVM upgrades are engineering packages that are either axle upgrade and done pre or post registration and increase your GVM legally and officially. And if you can, get a pre-registration axle upgrade GVM. So that's the end of this video. If you'd like to hear more on this subject, contact me via Facebook, post on there, or put a comment in here. I will be doing more of these, but it's all going to be driven by reader feedback. So tell me what you think and tell me what you'd like.